Believe it or not, Eraserhead is my most spiritual film.
What will elaborate on that?
No.
And I make films because I have not learned anything else.
Welcome to the Emma of the Impact Film Podcast, where my guests pick a movie neither of us have seen. I'm Emma of the Impact. I might not be a monster, but I am the beast that shouts love at the heart of the world. Today we're discussing Shin Godzilla. My guest today is...
Josh Levesque.
Simple. All right.
Yeah.
Shin Godzilla is a satire on bureaucracy, facing the most formidable Godzilla there's ever been. Do you know how deep this fandom is? Are you part of the fandom?
I am not. I am very aware of how deep the fandom goes. I personally am not. I've only seen the American ones. I think the first one I ever saw was the Matthew Broderick remake in the 90s, which is probably why I got turned off by the idea of Godzilla for a minute.
Yeah, that's universally hated.
Yeah.
Why did you pick this movie?
I hadn't seen any of the Toho Godzilla movies or any of the originals or anything except for Godzilla versus Megalon. I watched randomly because the character of Jet Jaguar seemed interesting to me, and I was like, I want to see what this guy's all about.
Yeah.
So I just watched that one day while I was working, and it was fun. I was like, okay, this is enjoyable. I should probably watch more Godzilla movies. I got busy and I haven't checked anything since, but I watched the Gareth Evans one, I think, with Bryan Cranston, so that I would be ready to watch King of the Monsters that Michael Dougherty did. And I watched Kong Skull Island so that I could watch Godzilla versus Kong. So I've seen all the recent American versions.
The legendary
Yeah.
series. I don't think any of the legendary ones. I've seen the
Fun.
1998.
Yeah.
Because it came out when we were young. I am also not a part of the deep fandom that there is for Godzilla. So if I get something wrong, you guys can let me know in the comments. I'm doing my best to be respectful. Was this movie what you expected when you first started watching it?
Yes and no. I would say yes because I have heard so much about it. I was fortunate enough to catch Godzilla -1 in theaters. I got invited to one of the premieres, and it was amazing. Is this what the recent Japanese Godzilla movies are like? Because if that's the case, I really need to see Shin Godzilla because it had been recommended to me by a bunch of people. Other friends who have similar tastes than me were like, yeah, I wasn't really into the Godzilla movies originally, but Shin Godzilla is so good. Like, it kicks so much ass. You have to check it out. And it's so impossible to find. And I saw it on your list and I was like, I got to watch this one finally. Having read my friends' reviews, I knew it was the bureaucracy subplot and government red tape, but it definitely hits different, I think, watching it post-pandemic, seeing a government respond to such a devastating mess and still having all the bureaucracy behind it. I wasn't expecting so much of that, and I liked the juxtaposition of it jumping between kaiju destruction and then government chit-chat.
This was inspired by the usual inspiration from Godzilla, originally with the bombs on Nagasaki and Hiroshima and all the aftermath of that. But this was specific reaction to the legendary film being very popular and doing very well. It'd been 12 years since Japan had made a Godzilla movie. 2011, you have the Fukushima disaster, which, Lord, earthquake, tsunami, a nuclear plant. The nuclear plant was affected in such a way that it couldn't cool anything down. The government was very slow to inform everyone. It was very slow to make decisions, which made it worse. And they're like, you know what? We don't have to mention to anybody the words core meltdown. Like, we don't have to do that, do we? And then this is worst nuclear event, the only one also on the highest level 7th scale of nuclear events since Chernobyl. So this was a huge deal. I thought it was going to be more of an action movie like the original Godzilla or Godzilla -1. And we have this brilliant, very fast paced, cut fast meeting after meeting. A scientist went missing. And then the boat's been sunken down. There's something happening in the bay. And then it's meeting after meeting when it starts to become more apparent that there's a creature. All of the politicians and the scientists, environmental and biologists, no one wants to say anything officially because we worry about their reputation. Throughout the meetings and everything that we see, which continue to happen, we even see the prime minister wearing a suit that the prime minister was wearing when the nuclear problem happens, the
Yeah.
specific suit. Shin Godzilla is a very specific Godzilla, and I think it's one of the best iterations when it comes to the monster. You and I are horror folks. We know
Oh, yeah.
monsters can represent very simple to complex ideas and thoughts, especially as a horror guy. What do you think of the king of the monsters in that respect?
I love the backstory and the history of Godzilla and what he's represented. Anyone will say horror has always been political, and even though the kaiju movies, I was never something I got into as much as a kid. Reading up on them and seeing the message behind it and understanding it was clear as day. Just like Creature from the Black Lagoon, I agree. I think this is, at least to me, obviously, I can't say much having only seen a handful of these movies, but this was definitely the Godzilla that worked for me because I get the message, I get the core political backstory to it, and it's meaningful. The dialogue was great, even though I'm watching it with closed captions because obviously I'm doing the Japanese with subtitles, and it's still compelling, and I'm still invested in what these human characters are saying, and then you still get the intense action and crazy, horrifying sequences with this monster and the actual evolution of it throughout the film. Just it was fascinating.
Have you seen the original Godzilla?
No, I don't think I've seen the original Godzilla yet. That's one I gotta get on for sure.
It's crazy. If you take out all of the scenes with Godzilla in it, it is a World War II movie.
Mhm.
The original Godzilla came out in 1954. It's only been 9 years since the bombs were dropped, Nagasaki,
Mhm.
Hiroshima. Only 9 years. So the veterans of that war watching this movie, and then it's only been 2 years, 1952 is when America stopped occupying Japan after the war. But I can't imagine being in the theater for the original Godzilla where they'll play the air raid sirens when
Mhm.
Godzilla's coming. There's scenes where a mother's holding her child. She's like, "It's okay, Daddy will come home." And this is all about Godzilla. If you take out Godzilla, it's World War II. I can't imagine being in a theater, having been in the war, having suffered the war, and you see this insurmountable, massive, aggressive, indestructible creature.
Yeah.
It must have brought so many memories, and that there are scenes where the people that are injured are in these pop-up hospital areas where people bring tend to. It's terrifying how much of a World War II movie Godzilla really is. And of course, when it comes to the lasting radiation that he emits, especially from his fire breath, right?
Mhm.
From what Godzillas you have seen, how does Shin Godzilla as a monster stick out to you?
Obviously, with the message there is one thing, and then just from a filmmaking standpoint, I'm so used to seeing Godzilla as a guy in a costume or a practical with miniatures and stuff, and seeing Shin Godzilla as this full CGI or a mix of CGI with puppetry and
Yeah,
everything.
motion capture.
Realize, yeah, just so insane. The whole evolution, seeing him in his first form, which I think was what was most unexpected, is I just assumed Shin Godzilla was going to be Godzilla comes out of the water looking like Godzilla and just starts devastating stuff. So seeing that original form at the beginning of the movie, I was like, oh, I was not ready for what this was. And then just the little details of like him spitting the blood out of his vents when he's like cooling off, and the seeing the
He's in constant pain.
yeah,
That's what really strikes me. I feel so bad. He's in constant pain,
yeah,
constantly evolving because being a giant creature coming from the sea pressure to air level pressure, your blood vessels, they're going to pop.
yeah.
When we see the blood spew out and how painful it even looks for him to move, it's so sad. There's really two main characters, I would say, in my opinion, and it's Rando Yaguchi and Kayako Ann Patterson. Kayako Ann Patterson is a representative from the US,
Yeah.
and she doesn't come into it a little later. And then Rando's character is a young guy he's a part of all these meetings, and it just focuses on him. Once we have to
Mhm.
get through these scientists we mentioned before that don't have the balls to say anything, they get a ragtag team of scientists and such to figure out what's going on with this creature. And they do eventually have the notes from this rogue scientist. It was his boat that sank, and he had left Japan and everything after his wife died of radiation complications. They find out, okay, so this thing's constantly evolving. It's huge. How is it surviving on land? To find out this thing doesn't have an oxygen based metabolism, dude. It's nuclear fission.
Yeah.
It's basically a nuclear reactive core walking around.
Yeah, it's nuts.
When we have the bigger attacks, when the US is using the B2 bombs, which are not nuclear, and dropping it on him, that whole scene, what do you think about that?
Oh, that whole sequence was intense. There's so many shots of him peeking out of the smoke, or you just see this intense devastation, and then it just kind of settles and he's still just hanging out. So intimidating. I thought that whole sequence was gorgeous and obviously terrifying. I couldn't imagine being in a plane like that thinking you're making a difference, shooting him down, and then just to see all of your effort did absolutely nothing, and then wondering what he's going to do next.
Absolutely nothing. When they get to the B2 bombs and they have actually hurt Godzilla, he's bleeding from his back, and then he just lunges forward and this fire comes out of his mouth, and we see in moments this destruction of Tokyo.
Oh yeah.
And then after that, it's like evolving more. It's getting purple in the back, which I assume the fact that instead of bleeding, it starts turning purple in the back because it's evolving to the injuries that it's sustaining. And that's when out of its mouth, that great Godzilla roar, originally made by a resin glove going against a base for that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And then it goes this beam into the sky.
Yeah.
And then it needs a nap.
Yep. It's exhausting when you fire that kind of power out of your mouth. The fire breath focusing and concentrating into that beam sequence was so cool.
That
I
was so
rewound that like
fucking
2 or 3
metal,
times.
dude.
I was like, this is the coolest shit ever. I'm so mad I slept on this movie for as long as I did because I would have watched it 100 times after seeing that. Just that sequence was so cool.
Then the movie picks up pace a little bit because of the US's involvement. Because after that big incident, what the fuck? America's okay, obviously we need to use thermonuclear bombs on this thing. Obviously. Solution, problem solved.
That's how we fix everything. Yeah.
That's how we fix it. How we fix it. Even though in this movie, the reason Shin Godzilla exists is because in the 50s, when the US occupation was leaving, they just dumped a lot of nuclear waste into the bay.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know,
they knew that somebody else would have to deal with it 60 years later.
Not in this way, though.
Not our problem.
Not in this way. He's napping in the middle of Tokyo. So they take these samples from him and they figure out that they probably got 2 weeks before he regenerates. So this is also heavily emphasized by the scientist who kills Godzilla in the first one. He invents a bomb that doesn't exist called the oxygen destroyer, and which has to be done underwater. He regrets creating this. He doesn't create it in response to Godzilla. It's the war. And he has an eye patch. Yeah. Love it. I can't let this get into anybody's hands because it's just going to cause more war, more weapons. This is worse than the bombs that were dropped on Japan. And he can't bear the idea of another nuclear event happening in Japan. The knowledge of the oxygen destroyer is safe.
Yeah.
From everyone else. They're making a huge deal. We can't have thermonuclear bombs because this movie does have a lot of critique of Japan and its government slow to react and how it affects the people. But it also has this Japanese pride. They have to race to figure out, okay, we can figure something out before you do that. We have this plan to coagulate his blood and it'll hopefully freeze him. It could make things a lot worse, but we're really hopeful that this will work. The character of Kayako, who is from the US, she buys them a little time because there's a lot of rules for Godzilla. The director of this film, Shinji, Higuchi, and then also Hideaki Anno, and one of them being the creators of Evangelion. Godzilla cannot be a villain and then in parentheses, anymore. While the original 1954 Godzilla was purely destructive, modern iterations portray him more as a force of nature or anti-hero. Anti-hero is mostly in the American films where he's
Yeah.
protecting the US from these other monsters. So he's seen very differently in the legendary film series. Those are the ones you've seen. Are you more accustomed to the anti-hero Godzilla?
I would say so. I think I've always just assumed he was more of an empathetic character because he didn't ask for this, and
No,
it's
he
not like
didn't. I want to hug them all.
yeah, he means well. I would be doing the same thing in his situation. I've never actually seen him as like a villain, which I think is probably what's so appealing to me about him.
Me too. He's just a creature. He's not.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's not personal, guys. You guys taking it so personal.
Yeah.
Godzilla must have certain physical traits, and then there's a list of that. It has to have 3 rows of dorsal fins and such. Fair, because you want to keep that iconic look. Of many reasons, people just like the 1998 version, and he just seems like a glorified T-Rex. He doesn't
Yeah.
have that same shape.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's what threw me off the most watching it in the 90s is I was like, that's what Godzilla looks like. I could have sworn it was different. And I feel like that's where they overcorrected, where they were like, we're going to do a cool digital Godzilla and we're going to make it more intimidating and more appealing for like mass American audiences. And I'm like, this is not what Godzilla is supposed to look like at all.
Want to know a suggestion the director had for the creature designer for the 1998 one?
Sure.
What if we made the creature a little bit more sensual, a little bit sexier? And the guy that created it, he's like, what?
I know there are the monster fuckers out there, but not
No, I respect that.
not at that
I
level. Yeah.
respect.
I haven't seen the 98 Godzilla on anyone's Hear Me Out yet.
No, I don't
it
think
it
so
it
either. I
didn't
have not.
yeah.
Maybe Gary Oldman's Dracula when he's in beast form is a hear me out of mine. Maybe. I don't know. I didn't say that. This movie, it's intense. It reminded me, I don't like to compare movies, but I think when it comes to satire and bureaucracy, I've never seen one as funny or effective since Terry Gilliam's Brazil. I don't know if you've seen it.
I actually have not seen Brazil. That's another one.
High recommendation.
Yeah.
It's so good.
That's in like my top 10. How have you not seen this yet? Because so many people have told me to watch Brazil. I love Gilliam, but yeah, it's that's one I still haven't gotten to yet. I'll move it up the list, I promise.
I have heard a lot of folks in their reviews been a bit critical about how much the meetings take up time, but to me, it's just part of the comedy. There's even a point where the screen blacks out in one of the earlier meetings and says meeting abbreviated. That's hilarious. I've never seen that before.
I think it was so effective. I love the comedy in this one. Just the certain moments where somebody was on the phone. It was like requesting permission for this. They need permission for this. Get permission from the chain of command where 7 people have to ask the prime
Oh,
minister if that's okay, and then his answer has to go all the way back to the end of the chain. I was like, this is what we deal with.
we'll be in one room and a topic will come up. And we're like, we can't have this meeting in here. And then they just
Yeah.
move to another room.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing.
It was so good. I think that's what surprised me is I went into the Letterboxd and like IMDb to read reviews, and there were some people that really did not like this movie. The Godzilla diehards from the watched all the originals that just were not on board, and I was like, oh, am I weird?
I don't know if it's the first, but it's one of the few Godzilla movies where there's no prior knowledge of Godzilla, except for
Yeah.
original. Even in Godzilla -1, oh, the locals call it Godzilla. I'm like, you. How long have the locals been
Yeah.
dealing with on this tiny island? It was funny to me in Shin Godzilla when he's walking around at this point and they're like, everybody go into a building. Are you kidding me? That's the what?
Yeah.
He moves in a straight line. You just go the other way, dude,
Yeah.
as fast as you can. In a building?
Yeah, you just saw what he did to the last 3 buildings. Like,
And
just
you
get
can't
behind
see
him.
where he is.
Yeah.
So, great advice. He's not a big character, but part of the Japanese one of the chiefs of defense for Japan is Jun Kanimura.
Mm-hmm.
Once I saw his face, I'm like, Boss Tanaka, because I'm a huge Kill Bill fan. Enormous. He's the one that gets his
Okay.
head cut off by
Yes.
Orenishi. Also, I'm not sure. I think you've seen this film. You've seen The Wailing, correct?
No, that's another one I missed.
Oh,
I'm so
as a horror guy, I think you have to watch I don't actually mean that.
No,
But you know
I
what I mean,
agree.
but
I think that's another one that's been on my watch list for a minute, but it's 2.5 hours long, I think. So that's why I rarely have time to get to that one. Anything more than 90 minutes.
generally, what stuck out the most to you with this film? For me, I think it's the pain that Godzilla is enduring through each evolution. He never seems comfortable. And then the ending that he's frozen upon Japan, and that's going to take 2 to 3 years for the radiation that he's created to die down. He's taken care of for now, and
Yeah.
the US still has their ability to use the thermonuclear weapons. Like, that's open because they know it's going to be something to address. And then that tail is the sickest thing I've ever freaking seen.
Yeah.
How do you feel when you saw it?
That final moment, I didn't know what to expect from this movie, but I figured it was over when they had frozen him. And I was like, okay, so this is the solution. They've got him taken care of for now. And it's going to just credits and we'll see what happens. When they panned up to the tail and you start seeing the, the fucking outlines and images, I was like, oh shit, this is insane.
A whole new species.
Yeah, and I wanted a sequel immediately. I was like, I need to know
I
what happens when he wakes up. I need more of this.
A lot of people do. I don't think it's gonna
Like what a
happen, but
cliffhanger.
that would be
Wow.
sweet. Was there another part that stuck out to you when it came to the monster, when it came to the bureaucracy, the science?
I was never really strong at science in high school or college. Anytime something like that comes up in a movie, I'm like, I'm gonna go with it. I'll believe that whatever they're saying works. I think it's easier to abandon disbelief when it's obviously a giant monster like kaiju movie. We move beyond anything too grounded in reality. But I would say the moments that stuck out to me most, obviously, I just love all the monster action, but it still felt like Godzilla. Like we had said, the 98 one didn't look like Godzilla or really feel like the Godzilla we know. This one, they did a good job of making it still look and feel like Godzilla, but giving their own flair to it with the evolution, the different versions, the different evolutions of it. The way his jaw opened up when he fired that beam was so gnarly. And the way his tail was also like part of it, and the end of his tail lighting up and everything. And yeah, that whole end sequence with whatever the next evolution was going to be, all of that just I haven't stopped thinking about it since I watched it.
That's the only thing we're not really spoiling for you. Let's leave you a little thing if you haven't seen Shin Godzilla is the tail. You think, oh, it lights up? No. It's fucking sick as hell. It's
Yeah.
one of the coolest things I've seen, and I want to be part of it.
Watch it for that last 10 seconds. Totally worth it.
It is totally worth it. It's worth it for the whole thing.
100%.
And I think maybe going into it knowing that it's going to be more of a comedy on bureaucracy and these fast cuts and might help. I didn't know what to expect. And I actually expected more of an action film, but even though I expected that, I love this.
It was a nice blend of you still get the cool Godzilla action sequences with these crazy effects, but then it'll jump into kind of like a Doctor Strangelove style satire of
Yeah, that's a great example.
it was the juxtaposition and the tone changes. I think worked beautifully. It was so much fun.
How did this film make you feel?
It made me definitely want to learn Japanese because it's such a beautiful language. I don't think the closed captions I got were very accurate because when they were
It's very
speaking
difficult.
English, the captions were wrong. And I was like, oh, I might be missing part of the message here. Made me want to watch everything else the people involved in this movie have done. I know the writer director of Godzilla Minus One had said that Shin Godzilla was part of what he drew inspo for Minus One, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to see Shin Godzilla so bad. But yeah, now it just makes me want to watch everything else that coincides with it. An effective way of getting a message across. There's like moments of where it was like somber, but it was still so well executed and so well written and funny. It's a nice blend of a movie you do want to throw on and actually pay attention to and listen to, and you'll get something much deeper out of it than just a giant monster wrecking shit. But you're also really going to enjoy the scenes of the giant monster wrecking shit because they're very well done. And he's just such an intimidating presence. And I
He's
feel
so
like that really gets
sweet. I
across.
feel so bad. That poor baby.
Yeah, the early evolutions are very cute
And
with those
the other
like
ones,
wild
these
eyes.
poor
Yeah,
baby. It's not asking to be alive this way.
true.
True.
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask you a question
Okay.
that has no answer, in my opinion. It's a subjective viewpoint, but there have
Mhm.
been academic articles written about this in terms of Godzilla relating to science fiction and Godzilla relating to horror. I know you love all film, but mainly as a horror presenter and invites people to horror movies. How do you place Godzilla in terms of horror?
I think that's where the people get confused. This is my personal opinion, but I also think horror is a genre and scary is an adjective. I think people think that they have to coincide. There are a lot of horror movies that are not scary, and there are a lot of scary movies that aren't necessarily horror. Most of them are like documentaries that just tell you what could be, and some of that shit's terrifying. But
Oh, that's usually
um
more scary. I got
yeah, exactly. I think Godzilla is definitely within the horror genre. The sci-fi elements are absolutely there. He's not an alien. He is within the Earth. I think they try to make it more grounded in reality with we don't know what could be happening with the way we mistreat our planet with nuclear waste and stuff like that. It's obviously an exaggeration of what could develop from our mistreatment of the planet. I think it's more horror than science fiction as well because sci-fi is always to me, I think the future, I think aliens, I think just like technology and stuff like that that we just don't have. Whereas the Godzilla movies try to take place in the present day, grounded in reality, but now there's a monster there. Anytime you have a monster, it definitely gives it in that horror realm. That's how I would argue it. It is science based with the ideas of evolution and what this creature is. If you want to get into the broader, just the franchise as a whole, the idea of these other monsters, Mothra and King Ghidorah, the other world and the portals that they're through, it definitely lends itself to science fiction. This is very much a real world situation. I think that's what makes the satire work so well too.
it's an interesting addition to science fiction in general in the sense that usually when it comes to big monsters and stuff like that, it's like we overcome them. But Godzilla, except for two films, the number one included, you can't destroy it. It's in
Yeah.
the rules. You cannot
Yeah.
completely defeat Godzilla without him being able to come back.
Yeah. You can only slow
So
them down.
chilling when you think about it.
Definitely still has some scary moments, but Shin Godzilla is not something I'm watching through my fingers or like worried about a jump scare or anything like that. Whereas,
It doesn't have the tone, and it's not
yeah,
meant to.
exactly.
It's like this idea that he'll just keep evolving. They mention wings.
Hmm.
That doesn't happen in the movie. But also, oh man, like there's the part of the ending. This is gonna get much worse.
Yeah.
You haven't seen anything yet. So and
Yes,
so
exactly.
that lends it to environmental problems that we face where I'm just a regular little person. I was this unsurmountable, evolving nuclear reactor walking around.
Until people can get on the same page and actually expedite a real solution, we can't
But,
stop it. We
there's a
can
lot
just
of
try to
political
slow it
meetings
down.
to be had, a lot of political
Exactly.
meetings
Yeah.
to be had, different rooms,
And
and
different, yeah, different conference rooms, different phone lines. It's yeah.
Godzilla always embodies this environmental threat in the ones
Hmm.
that I have seen. Really appreciate you being my guest today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
So, thank you, listeners, viewers, for tuning in to our episode on Shin Godzilla. Let the monster in you take a rest when you need it. Bye.